Hi, my name is Theo. I'm a software engineer at Thoughtworks. I have a confession. I am really sick of the word DevOps. Anyone else? Yeah? All right, cool. So everybody's claiming they're doing it. They talk about it all the time. They act like it's this secret sauce that you can just sprinkle around to solve all your problems when really it's not that easy. It actually requires a lot more time and effort. So ultimately, it starts with breaking down silos, people talking to each other and getting along. I think this is what a lot of folks are getting at when they say that DevOps is culture, and that it starts with people. So I am here to talk to you today about these 5 phases that I've seen teams go through when they're looking to facilitate culture shifts or imbue some of their practices with DevOps practices. So if you are currently or are looking to bring DevOps practices to your organization, hopefully you'll walk away from this talk with a few tips. So I will be talking about these phases from the point of view of a recent project I was on. We were creating a new product which involved a suite of APIs, and my team, the infrastructure team, we were responsible for making sure that all of those APIs had an automated path to production. So toward the beginning of the project, things would break and we had outages all the time. And it was really hard sometimes for us to gauge how painful things actually were. And coming to terms with this pain was twofold. First, we had to honestly admit to ourselves that there were some severe dysfunctional things going on our team. And then second, we had exceeded this threshold where teams could no longer sustain some of the pains that we saw. So for us, this tipping point came with multiple outages, thousands of Slack messages blowing up your phone, and we just had this endless blame game where we were constantly pointing fingers at each other. So we set out on this project with an initial goal, and we expected teams to be able to debug other applications even if they hadn't even worked on them before. And in our case, this goal was super unrealistic. Teams were working in isolation from each other, and in this case, this caused built-up tribal knowledge, and this was the central source of our pain. So, to reiterate, API teams, they were married to their own single applications, and they really didn't have an understanding of how all of these different services were interacting with each other. And Tom even earlier spoke to how you need to look at the system as a whole. You can't just look at the individual parts. So to address our pain, we started thinking about how to break down knowledge silos, and developers knew a ton about their applications, and so our idea was to enable developers so that they could create their own dashboards and share their knowledge publicly. So after bringing up these findings with our stakeholders, our infrastructure team started experimenting. So experimentation involves several rounds of trial and error. This is my notebook. These were my drawings. We drew out all of our code. We also wrote some shitty code and threw it away. Things really weren't tested. We hadn't really automated anything. And this is, we didn't really care about that. But what we did care about were the end users who were going to be using the tool that we created. And we really cared about the experiences that they were going to have when they were using this tool. So this phase felt slightly uncomfortable, but it still felt secure. And the reason why is because we had support from our stakeholders, but more importantly, we were given this freedom that we needed in order to explore new ways of doing things. And it's this process of figuring out a solution where our team was able to grow. And so the tool that we ended up coming up with and the infrastructure that our team created gave developers this solid foundation that they could build on. So our next step was to get developers to adopt the tool, and so we reached out to the teams individually. We shared documentation. We gave them individual demos, and we even paired with certain developers who wanted to know more about how to use the tool. So within a few hours, developers were filling in this foundation with meaningful and beautiful content. This process empowered developers to paint and share their own understanding in the form of a shareable dashboard. So for example, Teams created dashboards that traced a single request as it hit multiple APIs, and another team created a dashboard that showed success or failure rates for particular API endpoints that were of concern at the time. In our case, involving teams early on in this creative process and letting them write their own dashboards themselves gave them a sense of agency and control. So these are some of the building blocks to creating autonomous teams that can influence positive outcomes in the applications that they're building. To automate our process, we hooked up a pipeline to a single repository that held all of our dashboards as code. So anytime somebody made a new check-in to that code repository, a pipeline would trigger and it would push our dashboards to that shareable space for API teams to access. So over time, we learned that the simpler the tool, the more adoption you'll get. And by abstracting out a lot of complex knowledge, we've made it really easy for people to create dashboards. So over time, we had contributions that were coming from at least 7 different teams. And I can actually think a handful of those people now, they weren't even developers. Like, this is how easy that tool was. We also introduced alerts that integrated with our dashboard tool, and they would trigger under certain conditions. And since we wanted alerts to be actionable, we embedded runbooks into these alerts so that anyone from any team could fix the problem without needing specialized knowledge. Over time, we experienced fewer outages and faster times to recovery, but the part that I think is more important is that we really started talking to each other differently. And instead of blaming each other, we started working together and trusting each other. During showcases, we displayed several dashboards in front of the organization's executive board that tracked key performance indicators, again, something that Alan was showing us earlier. What he didn't mention, though, was that this level of visibility reassured board members, and it also gave them a chance to express appreciation for work that was being done on the ground by developers. And this is something that I think could probably happen a lot more at a lot of companies. However, there were times when our tool fell short and we had to recycle through some of the phases. This is actually a good sign. It means that people are engaged and they're giving you useful feedback so that you can continuously improve. An example of this was when we started experiencing alert fatigue. We were being flooded with alerts and became completely desensitized to them, which is a really serious problem if something were to actually happen, right? So this was painful, blowing up my inbox again. And so we had to recycle through those phases, and we were able to come up with a really great solution. So by the end of the 5th phase, it was really clear to us that teams were self-organizing, they were collaborative, they were autonomous. And as you go about your lives and your work every day, you know, it's inevitable that things are going to break. But we all have power in how we choose to respond. So that's it. Thank you.